Has George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead become completely irrelevant to the modern zombie genre? Let's find out in episode 6 of Obscurama. Hello, I'm Sam Ashurst and this is Obscurama, my regular look into the pages of the Psychotronic Encyclopedia of Film, where I find cool cult movies to discuss. This week we're going to be looking at Night of the Living Dead, which is still one of the greatest films ever made. But is it one of the most relevant? Let's see. When George A. Romero released Night of the Living Dead in 1968, it was a rebirth for zombie cinema. All previous incarnations were relegated to footnotes in film school textbooks, with most normal people believing that George completely invented the genre. But that's not actually right. The first zombie film was White Zombie, released in 1932. Then there was I Walked with the Zombie and Plague of the Zombies. When I say those titles, what element connects them? It's the element that makes Night of the Living Dead's reputation as being the first zombie movie especially interesting, because, unlike the films that came before it, Night of the Living Dead doesn't actually have the word zombie in the title. In fact, it was originally called Night of the Flesh Eaters, which would have taken it even further away from the genre at that time. Now, there's a good reason it didn't have the word zombie in the title, but we'll get to that in a moment. Night of the Living Dead had such a powerful impact, and it was such a turning point film that it basically erased the undead movies that came before it. In this episode, I'm going to argue that the same thing has happened since, with two films, both released in the same year, transforming the genre to such an extent that Night of the Living Dead has joined White Zombie in terms of the lasting impact they've made to the genre. And what are these turning point films? Day of the Dead and Return of the Living Dead, both released in 1985. Before Day of the Dead, George hadn't quite locked down the look of the zombie. He didn't even call them zombies when he was making Night of the Living Dead. In that film, they're ghouls. In Dawn of the Dead, they were named zombies, but they didn't look like zombies. They looked more like Smurfs. Really scary Smurfs. It wasn't until Day of the Dead that Romero and his effects artist Tom Savini started thinking about what decomposition would really look like, with Savini a trusted collaborator who was given plenty of time to create this new kind of movie monster.
Tom Savini is the most creative, the most energetic guy that you want on you could ever ask for on a set. He's always there. He's always eager and looking for what can we do now, how can we make this better.
I mean, we came up with a lot of the deaths ourselves, and that's the fun, to think of the stuff and then execute it and do it, you know. We started months ahead of time in my house.
We had, I think, a good bit of time, several, maybe 4 months to build all that stuff. We had a very small crew, we had a long schedule, and Tom really likes to make sure everything's prepared before you even go on set. That he doesn't like having to build stuff as you're, as you're dealing with set operations.
All these people were in my basement every day, whipping up foam latex and filling up dozens and dozens of small, medium, and large zombie appliances, so that we would have a shitload of those when it came time to make the movie.
When designing the undead, every single modern zombie film takes its lead from Day of the Dead, not Night of the Living Dead and not Dawn of the Dead. But it's not just the look of the creatures. Day of the Dead's story, which pits its survivors against scientists and the military, created tropes which appear time and time again in modern zombie movies and TV shows. And that tension started with Day of the Dead. These institutional enemies came from George A. Romero's feelings about society in the mid-80s.
What I was perceiving at the time as a disintegration of values of trust and trust in institutions, trust in government. So I think that it all added basically to the patina of the film.
But while the tropes have lasted, the genre hasn't. It may seem impossible to imagine now, but zombies went very quiet in the 90s, with a small number of classics, including Savini's own Night of the Living Dead remake, featuring Day of the Dead style designs, eclipsed by a lot of forgotten trash.
They say when you're dead, you're dead. They say you only get one chance at life. But for childhood sweethearts Missy and Johnny, true love will never die.
No offence if there are any big fans of My Boyfriend's Back out there, but in 2002, one film resurrected the zombie genre from its long sleep, starting a resurgence that hasn't been killed off 18 years later. That film was 28 days later, and it feels like a remake of Day of the Dead, especially in the film's final act, when the psycho soldiers get involved. But 28 days later also brought back an element from another film released in 1985, Fast Zombie. Night of the Living Dead was a perfect metaphor for the slow creep of death, but in the modern world, death moves quickly. It was such a perfect metaphor, Zack Snyder put it into his remake of Dawn of the Dead, and that's despite George Romero's resentment of Fast Zombies.
Zombies cannot run. I say this definitively as the grandfather or the godfather of zombies. Zombies cannot run. So anyone who has a zombie running, don't listen to that person. Their ankles would snap. I mean, you know, what did they do? Go and join a spa the moment they rose from the dead? Give me a break. They're dead.
Return of the Living Dead also added a significant element to the genre: humour. Before Return, zombie movies were mostly serious affairs outside of an occasional custard pie fight. But Return managed to make us laugh at the same time as scaring us. And bear in mind, this was a full 2 years before the Evil Dead franchise was transformed from a straight horror into a horror comedy. Modern classic Shaun of the Dead's name might be riffing on Dawn of the Dead, but its zombies look more like those in Day of the Dead, and its tone comes from Return of the Living Dead. But Day and Return didn't just have an impact on the tone, they also contributed to the lore. Before Day of the Dead's bub, zombies were a completely lost cause. Now, you'll frequently see films and movies try to civilize or rehabilitate the undead. Whole TV series have had this premise.
You eat people.
I know. It's just that I'm so much more confident. I can parallel park in one move now.
The undead are completely driven by their it.
But if I can't control myself, then I risk everything that matters to me.
Ce que vous allez voir dépasse toute espèce de logique et change les perspectives du monde qui nous entoure.
I am a partially deceased syndrome sufferer. What I did in my untreated state was not my fault.
Quick question. What do zombies eat? If you said brains, you'd be right. After 1985, that is. Return of the Living Dead invented the brain-eating trope that's been present ever since. In Night of the Living Dead, they weren't such fussy eaters. So, just as Romero relegated films like White Zombie and I Walked with the Zombie to an early grave, if we're being fair, we'd also bury his first 2 zombie movies as irrelevant to the genre as we know it. But if burying Romero's first 2 zombie movies upsets you, don't worry. In the horror world, nothing stays under the soil for long. That's it. Please like, subscribe and share this video. And if you can, please do support us on Patreon. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you at the movies.
Make sure you don't miss any of our future Hex Presents videos or any of our other crazy shows at Channel Hex by hitting subscribe and the bell notification icon. Also, if you would like to support our channel and help us make more exciting and fun shows, then do support us on Patreon. by hitting the link in the description. Thank you guys, and goodbye.